Hey everyone, it's Will, the host of the Everyman Drummer podcast, the one that you can listen to on Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, Apple Podcasts, all of those other podcast places. But here's the best part. You're probably wondering, how am I getting it distributed? Well, I'm here to tell you that, and you have to check it out. Anchor.fm, or even downloading the Anchor app on Android and Apple iOS systems right there. It's so easy that anybody can use it to start their own podcast. Hell, even me, a drummer, can use it to start their own podcast. And the best thing, check this out, the best thing about using this app, you guessed it, it's free. And they also help you distribute your podcast against all the other platforms that are being used today for everybody to get their podcast listened to out there. So I encourage you guys, check it out. If you really want to get a podcast started, use anchor.fm. It's the only one that I use. I know there's other hosting sites out there, but this one is absolutely 100% free. You just need your email address, and you got to have a cool voice to use it. Maybe, but who knows? But you all get the point of it. It's really easy to get it started, and check it out on anchor.fm. And welcome to episode 2 of the Everyman Drummer podcast. And I'm your host, Will. And we're going to be talking about today, we're going to pick up on topics that we got from the first episode that I did. And we're going to be talking about products and the products that I used. But let me first start off by saying this. I am not endorsed by any of the products that I use except for my drumsticks. I'm endorsed by Scorpion Sticks Percussions out here in Bensonville, Illinois, small local company who I was introduced to by another drummer friend of mine, John Bottoms, and he is an endorser of the same product. They make a very good stick, and they built one specifically for me. It's kind of like it's based off of a 5A stick with the .555 diameter, and it's a 16 and 1/4 quarter inch of in diameter, or in length, I'm sorry. Similar to the one of Neil Peart, it's the same length as his. I don't use the typical 16-inch length drumstick. This one's slightly longer, and you're starting to see a lot of other drummers use the same length as well. But it works for me. The grip it's a very nice, it's soft in the hand. It's got a good weight to it, which I like, versus the lighter sticks. You'll see that other drumsticks, they have maple drumsticks, and they're really light. I've tried those before with Vater and ProMark, and I just snap right through those. And the drumstick from Scorpion is made out of what they call weapon grade hickory. I believe it's hickory. I'm looking at it right now. Yes, it is, and it's just an all natural feel. It's very durable. They do take a punishment. They're very similar to the same type of wood that Vater drumsticks use too. I've used those in the past as well. But before we get any further, again, I just wanted to let anybody know that I am not endorsed by anybody except by Scorpion Sticks Percussions out of Bensonville. Just a great product. We'll get into that product later. They're a local company, and I like to support a lot of independent local manufacturers around in the area, whether it be here in Chicago or anywhere else in the United States. But let's get on to it. We're going to talk today about a recent product that I just picked up from Sweetwater Music out of Indianapolis, or Fort Wayne. Is it Fort Wayne? It's Fort Wayne, Indiana. They're a very good company. I was recommended by Nick DiVirgilio from Spock's Beard and a bunch of other great bands that he's played with. He is an educator over there and their studio drummer, and I actually saw some of the product reviews that he did, and if it's good enough for Nick, it's going to be good enough for me and probably for everybody else to use Sweetwater Music to get all of your gear from. Shipping was free, but I did pay taxes. We'll get into that's a completely different episode on a different podcast on a different channel. If you might as well get to it here. We don't talk about any of that political crap on this channel. This is all drums, drummers, and the fun stuff, the stuff that makes, us as musicians, as drummers happy. None of that negative crap that's out there right now. But again, you want to listen to that stuff that's probably up or down the dial, check those guys out. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. Again, Sweetwater. I placed the order in on Thursday. I got it Saturday morning. It was like FedEx showed up, and I'm like a kid on Christmas, waiting for Santa Claus to get the presents out, and that's how it was. And in that order, I had placed an order because I was wanting to replace several snare heads in my collection. Um, Two of them are the Evans, the EC12 reverse power dot drum head, which is a standard one that I use on a lot of my snare drums. And then I bought this other one. It's a very vintage head by Evans. It's, or quote unquote vintage. You can't see what I'm doing here, the quoting with the fingers, but it's I bought the 56 Evans Calftone head, and I wanted to pair that with my vintage Slingerland snare drum, which it gives a it complements that drum very well, and it gives a vintage sound to it. I have the box right here. The golden era of drumming, Evans 56 Calftone drum head. It's one ply. It says it's uncoated, but it's calf skin toted on there. If anybody is familiar with the older Remo drum heads, the fiber skins, I believe they were called, they have that very vintage calf tone feel on there. It's like sort of like an off-white, not like your typical coated drum heads that have that very white feel texture to it. This has got a different texture feel. You really have to work on it when you're playing the drums. When you're playing the snare drum on this one, in this case, you really have to work at it. It brings out such a vintage sound to it. They say it's ideal for rock and jazz. You probably could use it for anything. I don't really go off what it ideally is used for. A lot of those products, you probably use them for, say, a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But again, I'm looking at the box here. It's a one ply uncoated 14-inch drum head. It's the Calftone, a very natural type drum head, and using the Evans 360 level 360, meaning that all the way around the collar it's pretty even. So you're gonna get some other drum heads that there might be some slight deficiencies on them when the way they're made, and Evans has a technology that they use that keeps everything pretty much circle, the 360 all the way around. And looking at the box, it's they take a lot of the it's innovation that they say that Chick Evans used from 1956, changes the drumming world forever by inventing the world's first synthetic and weatherproof drum head in his original Dodge City facility. So using something like that, again, it's not like your Mylar head. It's a synthetic. Again, you're gonna have to work for it. To get the tone that you get out of the drum. It's very vintage. It's a very old sounding sound. It's something that I look for on certain snare drums, especially if you pair it with a vintage one. Again, I'm probably gonna go and swap out my regular standard snare drum with one of these. I just love the tone that it brings out, and you can use it for any of the newer type snare drums as well. It's not just rooted that you're going to use it on a vintage drum. That's not the case here with this drum head. This drum head is, you could use it on a modern drum to give that older vintage sound with it. Again, it's very warm sounding, gives you that, if you listen to the old jazz records of the 50s and the 40s, it's going to give you that sound depending on how you tune it. Took it for the test drive yesterday after installing it, played it with the snares off. It gives such a warm tone. I do tune my snares a lot higher than you typically find with some of these. A lot of the vintage drummers, they have like a medium to tight tuning. I have mine to fairly tight tuning on the top, along with the bottom head. The little tuning advice I got from Benny Greb, he's got a great video up on YouTube on how to tune the drum, and watching that video, it dawned on me, maybe perhaps us doing it in the star position across from each other, maybe it is wrong, but there's no rules when you do it. And he does his in a very unique way. He just goes around, and I'm sure a lot of you drummers do the same thing, where instead of going in a star pattern like we're taught many years ago, tune the lug directly across from each other, he goes in adjacent order next to each other and goes around in a circle and tunes everything evenly like that. And tuning for the first time after all those years of doing it in a star way, when you start putting the head on, it was a lot easier. I was impressed when I threw this head on. Usually you're going to get several pitches for every different lug on the drum. In this case, there's 8 lugs on this drum, and each lug, once I slapped that head on there and tightened it down, there was no deficiencies on any of the lugs. What I mean by that is, usually when you're tuning your drum and you go around in a circle and you test out every lug that's on the drum, you want to try to match the pitch on there, and it'll have a melody, and one of them might be lower and one of them might be slightly higher, and you try to match it to the rest of the majority of the lugs on the drum. When I put this head on there, it was I was impressed. I was like, I went around, tuned each lug down, gotten tight down to what I wanted, took the drumstick, started going to tuning each lug, and they all matched perfectly without me even doing anything to it. And from that point, it's where I either cranked it or detuned it, make a nice warmer, softer tone for it. The drum that it's on, it's a vintage Slingerland drum. It still has the Niles badge on there, which my father actually picked up secondhand here in Chicago, and then I took ownership of it. He's more of a hobbyist drummer than I guess I am. I've already, like we've mentioned in episode 1, I've been blessed to be able to tour locally in the area and in the Midwest with several bands and get experience out there and record in several studios as well. But back to the drum itself, it's got such a beautiful tone on there. It's something that I look forward to playing this drum. I actually did take it down from the wall. It is actually it's central to my regular kit right now as the main snare drum for the time being, until I get bored and want to try out another one of my other snare drums before going back to my main drum. But anyway, back onto this 56 Evans Calftone head. It is got such beautiful tonality. It's one of those, you rub your hand across it, it's almost like a conga head. You can play with your hands on it. The best way that I can describe it is simply that it's like a conga head. It was so easy to tune. It's just one of those, it's an effortless snare drum head to tune. You're always fighting on other drums, maybe even on other snare drums as well, to try to get it to match evenly with all the lugs. And this one was a quick process, and it was really fast, and it was very pleasing to the ear. And then when I finally did take it out to just test it around the kit, doing rolls, I did find myself having to work a little harder to try to do a double stroke roll, to try to do a single stroke roll, to try to do a paradiddle. I found myself working a lot harder than you would on a typical Mylar head. The bounce, you really have to work at it. Versus the other drum heads that I have, I use EC12s or G12s. I use G12 quoteds on all my toms. And basically that is a double ply tom. That is a double ply drum head with one ply on there. When they say double ply, they got two pieces of Mylar sandwiched with oil in between. And it's usually 6 and 6 to give you the 12. I went for the 12. I started using the 12. They're easier to tune. They're nicer. It doesn't mute and doesn't choke the drum out. I like to go for the wide open sound on my toms, a la Neil Peart, Simon Phillips, Steve Smith, a lot of guys like that. The old guys, the Tony Williams, the Lenny Whites of the world, all those guys, they have a wide open sound, and it's a sound that I've always loved, even as a kid back then, and that's where it started from. My dad on his drums, he had a wide open sound on his toms. Basically, the 70s, he was influenced by cats like Billy Cobham, guys like that, and they played predominantly with an open sound on their toms. So that's what I look for on my toms. But back to this snare drum head, and in comparison to the other ones that are on there, you really just have to work at it. They say that drumming it's not supposed to be work, but in this case, just for the snare drum, it is. But we're always, that's the challenge of it. You want to build up your chop speed. If you can fly like a Buddy Rich or a Gene Krupa on these calfskin heads, because that's what they used back then. They used calfskin heads on those drums back in the 50s and the 40s and the 30s when they were coming up and when they were the gods. They still are the gods, but in the heyday of the big band eras, it was Calftone. It was calf drumheads, and they made it look so effortlessly when they were doing their rolls. And you take that for granted now, being a modern drummer, and you play that, and you're just like, whoa, I really have to work at this. I can't just easily do what I was able to do on a different drum head. But that's the fun of it. You're always learning. You're always improving, self-improvement on the instrument. I always stress that. You're always going to find a way to improve on the drum kit. Even in music, if you're a guitar player, you're always going to improve. Bass players, vocalists, whatever instrumentalist, a piano player, they're always looking for ways to improve themselves on their instrument of choice, and just to get better. I don't think you can ever master said instrument. You're always going to want to learn, because something new comes out every few years, maybe every year, every couple months, every week. You're going to see something new every day, you know. But this, again, I was very impressed with the Evans 56 Calftone drum head, and pairing it with such a vintage drum, it brings it back. It's like you're immediately transported back to the heyday of the big band era. So to actually play it, it brings back a lot of nostalgia. And I'm not probably the first. I know I'm not the first one to use it, and I'm not gonna be the last one to use it. Again, I'm right now favoring it right now for the snare drum, because it has the sound that I want, the sound that I like out of a snare drum, that vintage sound, and that's what goes with it. Again, I'll probably be changing my main snare drum head to one of these. Usually I use the reverse dots by Evans for a more controlled sound. Again, I got inspired to try this out from Steve Smith. He uses I want to say it's a fiber skin head on his snare drum, and that's on his main snare drum. I believe, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Send those questions to me on my Twitter handle at @TheRealWillGeronimo. You can check that out there. I'll be posting updates for the show up on that Twitter handle as well. But I believe he does use a fiber skin. If not, he did at one point. I know he was using CS dots on his toms. That's, again, we're going off the rails here a little bit on that, and that's breaking away from what we're talking about. And we're talking about the Evans. He uses Remo, and Evans. I've used the Evans products for as long as I could remember. I've started off like everybody using Remo, and then you want to try something different, and you just fall in love with it. I haven't looked back from Evans. Everything that I swap out, if it's a drum I'm borrowing from, if it's a drum I've acquired that has a fairly new Remo Aquarian or whatever, an attack head on there, I will swap those out for an Evans head. That's just me. Again, I am not endorsed by this product. It's just a product that, to me, it's pleasing to the ears. It's pleasing to the ears. I felt good with them ever since. They've never let me down. I've never had an issue with it, with these heads. So, and trying out for the first time the 56 Evans Calftone head, it is very, very, very pleasing to my ear, especially for the sound that it has. Again, I can't say enough about this head. You could pick it up at a local drum retailer. It retails roughly around $18, $19, depending on where you're getting it from. But it's a very good, like I said, very good head. It gets my recommendation. You guys should all, if you have the chance, I would highly recommend trying it out. It is a great drum head, great complement to your kit and for the sound that you're looking for. It's a vintage sound for the modern era, and a lot of guys, I know there's drummers out there that cherish a lot of the new stuff as well. There's a lot of drummers out there like myself. I cherish a lot of the older sounds. Don't get me wrong. I am gonna love these new products that are out here as well. But there's something about the old products. Yes, we're gonna pay a ton for them, but at the same time, you're getting buying a piece of history, a musical history. We'll get on the subject of ride cymbals. I'll talk to you about my favorite rides that I would love to purchase at some point in the near future. But as for this product, Evans Drumheads never have let me down, and this one was very pleasing. It was a very, very good purchase on my end. I'll recommend this to any drummer out there if they want to try something different. Try this Calftone head out there.